Yeah, it was the first car where it's written Porsche. The number one had a mid-engine. And take a look here, the Moby Dick. Do you know the Moby Dick? Most powerful 911 ever.
Bem-vindos a mais um vídeo do Ícones. Hoje estamos no Armazém super secreto da Porsche, onde a marca alemã guarda os seus maiores tesouros. Venham comigo.
So, welcome here from the very secret storage facility somewhere around Zuffenhausen, and we have approximately 350 cars and 140 registered and approximately 100 always on the road. We call it Porsche Heritage Experience, so we take part on historical races, events, expositions all around the world. And we have different sections. So first we have our series production cars, race cars and prototypes. A lot of them. And yeah, it's up to you where we start now.
You just lead and
okay.
You know.
So I would say let's go in a little chronological order to the first Porsche ever, but not the original, but a show car.
Okay.
Made for the anniversary in 2018, so the 70 years of sports cars.
Okay.
We celebrated 4 years ago, and next year we will celebrate 75 years.
75 years.
Yeah, so the first Porsche ever got the license on 8 June 1948.
Mm-hmm.
And it was made in Gmünd, so we bought the first building in 1938, so factory number one in Zuffenhausen. So when you buy a new Porsche and you come to pick up it in the factory, you will get it in factory number one.
Okay.
But we left Stuttgart in 1940 for World War II. Stuttgart was heavily bombed, and we went to Austria, to Kärnten, Gmünd, a little village. And yeah, we did constructions as in the time before, but then Ferry said, I want to build a sports car. And he did. And this is a show car made for the anniversary 4 years ago, 70 years of sports cars. But it looks exactly as the car looked at on 8 June 1948.
Is this one made of aluminium?
Yes. So all the cars built in Gmünd had a body handmade of aluminum. We built altogether 52 cars, and the number one was the first car where it's written Porsche on the hood here. So, and what's important is all the cars built in Austria handmade of aluminum, but the number one still had a special technical feature. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
No. So yeah, the number one had a mid-engine. And all 356 have a rear engine, but only the number one had the mid-engine. And yeah, we sold the cars, the first cars to Switzerland. The first 5 Porsche were sold to Switzerland. And 10 years later, we got back the number one, the original one, and now you can see the number one in the exhibition in our museum. I told you the first time when it was written the name of the family on the car, and in 1950 we sold the first cars to US. The importer was Max Hoffman from New York, and after a time, the customers in the US, they said, the cars are amazing, but it's written Porsche. What is a Porsche? Nobody knew Porsche, and that's the reason why Max Hoffman called Ferry and said, you have to design an emblem that everybody knows. My friends from Portugal or US or wherever, these are the sports cars from Zuffenhausen. And then we had an engineer inside the company, Franz Xaver Reimspiel is his name, and he designed the emblem. And I want to show you on a 356A and B on which parts we had it the first time, and I want to explain the meaning.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so 356 types, A and B. So, and you can see here yet on the hood, for example, the emblem.
Yeah.
So the first time we had an emblem was in 1952. Do you know on which part?
No.
No? So the first time it was on the steering wheel. You can take a look here. For sure, if you can find on the hood, it's for sure on the steering wheel too. Yes. And 2 years later, so in 54, we had it the first time on the hood, as you can see here. But take a look, 356A, and over there still 2. So there is no emblem on the rims or wheels. The reason is we had it the first time in 1959.
Only in 59.
Yes. So that's visible here, and
that's when you stopped having the Porsche name on near the hood also. And so you started only having the emblem.
Yeah, but no, here you can see, for example, the emblem and the together.
And the
yeah.
But was it after 59 that you stopped having it?
Yes, in front I didn't see still other types with in front written Porsche. No.
Okay. Okay.
But let me tell you something about the meaning of the emblem.
Yeah.
So you can see we have the red and the black stripes and the deer horns. Let's go to this one here, because this was the an emblem here. We had some tiny differences between in the decades, but this one here is good to show you because, for example, the 991 Speedster Heritage Edition, 992, sorry, Targa Heritage Edition, had yet the same emblem as this one, in homage to the first 911 generation.
Okay then.
So, and yeah, on the one hand, we have here the red and the black stripes together with the deer horns. So I don't know, how many regions do you have in Portugal?
We have several, very small compared to Germany.
Okay. In Germany we have 16. And in the past, it was Baden and Württemberg were own regions, but since 70 years we are together. But before we came together, that's the reason why we had the first time the emblem. That's the reason why we have here the emblem of Württemberg, the region Württemberg. In our dialect, it's called Schwabeländle, but that's very difficult to spell for you, I think so. And in the middle, we have the city emblem of Stuttgart.
Is it a kind of a horse?
Yeah, it's a horse. And the name Stuttgart comes from Stutengarten. So the garten is the garden.
Yeah.
That's easy. And Stute, that's the female horse.
Ah, okay.
And that's the reason why we have the horse inside and above on top the family name to show strong together. And yeah, I'm sure you like it. So, I can tell you something about the Targa, the first 911 generation here. And what's interesting is, so here with a roll bar, the first time, so we wanted to sell an open version in US, but with the law it was not possible, an open one without a roll bar, so that's the reason why we designed the Targa. And did you know that Targa comes from the Italian language?
The Targa Florio?
Yes, the Targa Florio, but the goal they set was to name this car Florio. But they thought, okay, maybe everyone says the nickname Flori, that's not so cool, it sounds not good. So that's the reason Targa, and Targa translated in English means shield.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
You didn't know?
No,
okay.
I didn't know.
And that's I think it sounds good, Targa, and
Targa.
everybody knows. Okay, 911 Targa. So that's really a very popular car.
The first ones were not in glass.
Yes, in plastic. The first ones we launched it in '67, and then later with glass. So I think it's the better version.
I think it was like the second year, something like that.
Like this, yeah.
That they started straight away. I remember.
Yeah.
Like that.
And let's take a look. I want to show you now the 550 Spider.
Yeah.
So the first full race car, or designed for only for racing, was the 550 Spider here.
I've got a miniature of this car on my computer.
Okay. Yeah. It's. I told you, so the first car really designed only for racing. And the whole car has a weight between 550 and 600 kilograms, and we have a power of 110 horsepower, top speed 220 kilometers an hour.
So that's why
at the beginning of the 50s.
Yeah, so that was, and the name of the race, which Carrera means race in Spanish, and that's where the name Carrera came.
Exactly, yeah. So you have to know, so at the beginning in 356, if the 356 was named Carrera, it was a Carrera engine inside.
Okay.
So that means, do you know what means a Carrera engine? No. It's called also the Fuhrmann engine, but the reason is so it normally the crankshaft is connected with a chain to the camshaft, but there is no chain. There are shafts with a gear and with a shape as a crown. And that's the reason for the king shaft, Königswellenmotor in German. So it was possible to achieve higher revolutions of the engine. And very good quality, but it was expensive.
Very expensive, yeah.
And still a special feature, every Porsche fan knows that the RPM has to be in the middle. And the first time that we had it in the middle was in the 550 Spider. Do you know the reason why?
Because the driver had to concentrate on the gear changes, and so he had to have the rev counter right in front of his eyes.
Yeah, that's it. Basically. That's it. So to know the perfect moment to change the gears, the reason why.
And then we go to Le Mans, the reason why the key is on the left. But that's a different story. But those are the kind of traditions still today held with Porsche, and that's very important.
That's very important. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and take a look here. The Moby Dick. Do you know the Moby Dick? Most powerful 911 ever. 840 horsepower.
Okay.
And we built in homage to the 935 Moby Dick. We built here the 935 in 2018, a limited edition, 77 cars. Do you know the price?
No.
I still remember, because it was very easy to memorize for me, because it was in 2018 and we celebrated 70 years of sports cars, and the first sports car was built in 1948. So the price was 701,948 euros. Yes, and here the 919s. So with the end of the project, we got all the LMP1 cars, and in the museum we have, for example, the 919 Evo, so the fastest car ever on Nürburgring Nordschleife racetrack. So and it's good to see here, because we had another record, drove in 1983, Stefan Bellhoff with a 956.
Yeah.
I am sure you remember.
I remember him very well.
6 minutes and 11 seconds.
In a Nürburgring.
Yes, and it was a record for 35 years, the fastest car.
Wow. Okay. He was a very talented driver, and unfortunately he died in one of these.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the 956 we used the first time for the air-cooled engine water-cooled cylinder heads. And we had here we have optimized the downforce because we used the first time the diffuser, and this is the most successful race car ever. We won 7 times an all-over victory in Le Mans.
Was it more successful than the 962C?
if we speak about a 956, it's together with the 962.
Okay.
It's together.
Because there was a small evolution.
Yes.
With the front axle.
Yes, because of the homologation. Yes, the foot had to be not in front, in front of the front axle. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I told you yet on the base of the 991 GT2 RS here, the 935.
This car is beautiful. I mean, it
would be more beautiful to drive on the street, but
it's not allowed.
Not allowed, no. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
One time to the bakery.
Yeah.
No chance.
Yeah.
But here we had the GT1 from 1998, so our last winner car in the old millennium in Le Mans, and it was something special. So it was the first Porsche ever with a whole monocoque and the whole body made of carbon fiber.
The first one.
The very first one. And later in a series production, the first was a Carrera GT, so our second super sports car. But here, the first one in 1998.
It's always good to touch a bit of history.
Yes.
And I remember the gearbox still being in H, and it was different from the competition, but very reliable. That's why. That's what helped them win. I remember this. I remember that victory very well.
And here with the red color on the mirrors.
Wow.
The winner. Yeah, it's written here. 1998, 6th and 7th June. Yeah. Let's go to see something other really cool. So here, let me show you. Do you know the Berg Spider 910/8? So that's really so cool because this car has remained unchanged for 55 years. 55. It's preserved from our colleagues, from the workshop. So really so cool. Take a look. As in the condition from 1967.
So it's completely untouched, unrestored.
That's it, unrestored and preserved. We'll take a look, the emblem too.
Yeah.
So that's really authentic and original. That's really great.
And it was like, they stopped it, they parked it, and that's it.
That's it for 55 years. So it's a homage to the prototype of the Boxer we launched in 1993 in Detroit. So last year we had the anniversary with 25 years. And we have some special optical and technical features. So, for example, the 6-cylinder naturally aspirated engine. Now you know what I'm talking about. And all the special parts, as here, the front apron, or the wheels and or the intakes here in the special color neodyme, and or B color inside here, the interior, and here with a special red here, leather interior, and it's written here. Yeah. And it's a limited edition. We built exactly 1,250 cars.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that at the time. Okay, then give us your perspective about this car.
So let's go back in the year 1988.
Okay.
So the idea was to have a sports car with 4 seats. So here, this is the 989, and I would say it looks really
good.
Cool for this time here. At the end of the 80s, so really a cool design, and Porsche had the idea, and as everybody knows, in this millennium, we had the first time the Panamera. So this is as a precursor, not a precursor, but it was an idea. It was an idea with 4 seats. Do you like the 989? What do you say?
Well, let's put it this way. What I see here is like you experimenting other design features, which we later saw on the 996.
Yes. For example,
that these wheels are like the 993, right? And I think
it's a good mix.
Yeah, it's a good mix, and I think that basically it's inspired the Panamera.
Yes.
And that's why I remember at the time after the launch, when I wrote the story, I said that if if Ferry Porsche had seen the Panamera, that he would be very proud of the project.
Yes, I'm sure, yes. And so, the idea, a sports car with 4 seats, was for a long time, as you can see, and we realized it finally with the Panamera, yes. Yeah, and here, for example, so the most important market is the China market, and here, 20 years Porsche China edition. Here, the Turbo S, you can see, so,
Is it very different, the taste and the equipment, this and the other from the
taste,
European?
The taste is another one, yes. And you have to know, so the average age of a customer in Europe is at the end of the 40s, and in China it's 32, 33, like this. The average age, so and this is the reason.
Got the money.
Yes, and that's the reason too why there is also another taste.
Okay,
that's another reason.
Yeah, but it looks good.
It looks good, huh?
Yeah.
So, but you can, if you buy a 911, you can choose between 120 colors.
But it's crazy.
That's crazy, yeah.
I was curious about this. What is this?
This is a special mix.
Is this a study for a Cayenne 2-door or 3-door?
And an open version, cabriolet. That's it's a cool mix. Inside in the interior, you can read it's written Cayenne.
Yeah, it's a normal Cayenne, but
So a lot of ideas. So we see prototypes, concept cars, realized or not realized. So that's here. We have really a lot of cars to see and to show you. Very interesting. But so let me show you still here the 959. We have still open there with the engine.
Yeah.
We used the technology of the 956 for the 959 here, and it was in 1986 or 87 the fastest car in the whole world, street legal, and so air cooling, but told you yet the water-cooled cylinder heads, water-cooled cylinder heads, and electronic all-wheel drive lift system. So this was really very cool for the 80s.
I remember it was a very sophisticated for its time.
It was a super sports car, And do you know how many did we build?
No.
292 cars with 450 horsepower, but included 29 sport versions with 515 horsepower and 2 turbochargers, so a big and a small one.
Okay.
In German it's called Registeraufladung, so one big and one small charger,
So because basically this was done just for the Group B homologation.
Yeah,
okay, that's right.
And the engine looks good, huh?
Yeah, it looks pretty neat for the time. Yeah,
it looks too good.
And because it's got a beautiful sound.
And of course.
Yeah, I've only heard it once, and it's a beautiful sound.
Beautiful. Let me show you. Here we have the GT cars here in this area. So good to see the 991 GT3 RS with a Weissach package. That's so cool here with a hood made of carbon fiber. And or 997. And but my favorite GT. Take a look here at the end on the right, the Farmer's GT. Can you see the Farmer GT?
Okay, I'll come.
The last one on the right. I call it the Farmer GT, the tractor.
You're talking about this one?
No, the tractor.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's put it the first diesel.
The first diesel.
Made.
Yes. Yeah. And they were. Do you know where they were not built in Zuffenhausen?
Where were they built?
And on the lake of Constance. The name of the town is Friedrichshafen. They made the Porsche Diesel. So this is with the small engine, so the Junior with a 1-cylinder. We had the Standard with 2 cylinders, and the Super with 3 and
cylinders.
The highest version, the Master, with 4 cylinders.
Oh, so you had 4 versions.
Yes, 4 versions, yes.
Wow.
You can take a seat. Huh? No? One time on the Farmer's GT? No? Okay. So I will do it. I will do it. The junior, the senior on the junior. Huh? Good?
And this is the road-going version of the GT1.
Yeah, you can see it's a license plate. So I told you 140 cars are registered, and take a look here with the license plate. So with a GT1 to drive, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, but this car had carbon fiber.
Not yet completely. I told you in 1998. Yeah. So we built altogether of the GT1 25 street legal cars. Okay. So 3 in 1996, then 21 in 1997, and one in 1998.
Which is the one which is complete.
We have in the exhibition in our museum. Yes.
Okay.
I still want to show you some prototypes or some really interesting
studies.
Yeah, for example, here the red 924, and in front is a 944, a concept car with a rear engine. A transaxle with a rear engine. So this 924 and this 944 was a concept here. So take a look with a rear engine.
Yeah, it does. Look at this.
Yeah, you can see everything here. The oil pan and everything here.
Crazy.
So this was really a concept and interesting. A transaxle with a rear engine. Incredible but true. Or take a look here. That's an inside here of the 919 here. Looks cool too.
So
inside view.
That's one taken apart.
Yes.
That was like a test car, and
like this, but it looks interesting, huh?
Yeah. Because you can see the engine, how the engine is part of the structure.
V4 engine and the electric motor together. So the Evo I told you we have in the museum. There was no homologation for the record lab, so that's the reason why only a weight of approximately 760 kilograms and a power of 1,160 horsepower.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That was with Timo Bernhard, right?
With Timo Bernhard, yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
And now, the Carrera GT. No, so the Carrera GT I told you with a carbon fiber, so it's visible too. So the whole body, the monocoque here, and you can take off here the roof to put it under the hood to drive.
Just like the Targa.
Oh, yes, like a Targa. Yes, and here I like this feature too here.
But is that for umbrella?
Or for the cash.
Rolls of cash.
And and the engine.
And that was the main feature of the car.
The engine and the sound of the engine. So a V10 naturally aspirated engine. And take a look here.
So it has this structure. This structure, which actually gave it more rigidity.
Yes. And the engine has a fixed valve game, so not with the oil pressure. So I was part of the project, and we in the engine shop. And one of my jobs was to install the valve game, and you have to now you have to go to the dealership in the maintenance to install it. I don't know how many kilometers, 20, 30, 40,000 like this, and then you have to install it. But the sound of the V10 that's so amazing, incredible. And 612 horsepower, and we used the first time here with a carbon ceramic brake in a series production here for all the cars, and central nut lock, the magnesium wheels. So really a fantastic car, and all with a manual transmission. All with a manual transmission.
Yeah, and I like the pedals still racing
like. Yes. And do you know it was a limited edition too? I told you the number of the 959. Do you know how many Carrera GT?
Yeah, I do.
You still remember?
I still remember. It was like you actually did less than was initially predicted. It was meant to be like 1,500, and you only produced 1,200. Was it something like that?
1,270 finally.
Okay, and something had to do because of the airbags in the US market, and Dr. Wiedking said, that's enough.
If Wiedking said it's enough, it was enough. That's it. That's cool. Huh? And here it's written here the series number, but you can see only 0000.
Yeah,
so
because this
the
is
pre-series cars are in our hands. Yeah, the cars were built in Leipzig in East Germany, our factory where we built the Macan and Panamera.
Yeah.
And the engines were made in Zuffenhausen.
Okay, these cars are beautiful.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I still want to show you the very first Taycan built in Zuffenhausen. 3 years ago, we launched the first full electric Porsche Taycan. We built the Taycans in Zuffenhausen, and we made a new factory in the old factory.
I saw that being built.
You saw it? Yeah, we have 2 engine shops, we have 2 main assembly lines, we have 2 body shops, we have 2 paint shops. And we are very, very happy to build the Taycan in Zuffenhausen because we hired more than 1,500 new colleagues. We had an investment of approximately 1 billion euros in Zuffenhausen. So it was really a wonderful thing for us. And this is really the very first Taycan built in Zuffenhausen.
It looks a lot like a mule car, the way you try to...
Yes.
Yeah,
But that's important too. That's for our emotions connected with the Taycan to have the very first one. So that's, take a look inside too.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing, the way, it's all in development.
We got the first feeling how it looks finally.
Yeah, because it was
completely... that's very important for the exhaust pipes from the Taycan.
That's it, because it's very inspired on the Panamera in a way.
Yes.
And that was just because of the press.
Yeah.
Because of all the spy photos and all that. Yeah, that's a piece of history.
Yeah, of course, that's so important. And let me show you still.
Whoa, I read about this car.
Okay.
About the development of this car and Walter Röhrl, and how they won the class that year.
Yeah, here it's written here, the name, that's so important.
I remember reading about this, and now to see the car here, it's like, whoa, it's mind-blowing.
So you can open,
Yeah. And they won the class in Le Mans with this car.
The 928 four-seater. Yeah. Do you know how many did we build?
No. That one?
2.
2.
Yes.
But
one got Ferry Porsche for the birthday. And what's really cool is, one time there was a press conference and a reporter asked Ferry Porsche, Mr. Porsche, I have one question. Would you buy a Porsche too? And he said, why? I get every birthday one for free. Was a good answer. And the 928 with 4 seats he got as well. And let's take a look. Yeah, it's here, Hammers.
Yeah.
Hey.
Wow.
Let me take a seat.
Yeah.
Hey, enough place. That's really cool. It feels like a Panamera.
Yeah, especially because you've got the special seats, and that's very important. Wow. These are the kind of cars I only read about and saw a couple of photos, and that's it. You never actually get to see the cars.
Yeah, I told you, only 2 cars, so that's very interesting. A 928 with 4 seats. Woof, that's it. And here a 968 Roadster. So at the beginning of the 90s, it was not the best time of Porsche, as you know.
Yeah.
And we had, I would say, not problems, but we had to-dos very important to do. So the first one was we had the transaxle cars and the 911, so the 928, 968, and 911. And but we didn't have two similar parts usable for the cars, and that was the reason why. There were many ideas, and one of the idea was a 968 Roadster.
Okay, because
as you can see here, the concept car, but approximately at the same time, we had the Boxster launch, or not the launch. So the concept car. We presented the concept car in Detroit, as I said,
in '93.
And the visitors at the fair in Detroit said, "What a wonderful car! You have to build this car," and we did. And this was the reason why it was stopped. The whole transaxle project was stopped. So, and that's clear. So this project too. But it looks good, a 968 Roadster.
Yeah, because I remember the 944 Cabrio. That was a successful car.
Of course,
and,
yes.
But in fact, I like the 968, but it never had a Cabrio version.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And what's important is the 968 were built in Zuffenhausen.
Ah, okay.
So the 924, the first transaxle car, was built in the factory of Audi in Neckarsulm, so 40-50 kilometers away from here. And the 944 was built at Audi too, also, but the engines came from Zuffenhausen from Porsche, and the 968 was built completely in Zuffenhausen.
In Zuffenhausen.
Yes.
Okay.
And still, I want to show you still another special car. So I show you yet the 989, the four-seater, the idea. And in 1991, we had a special type 932. Did you hear about it?
No.
So I will show you.
1991.
This one here. A four-seater too, another idea, another project. Yeah, it's written here.
Yeah, it's on
932,
it's on the side,
and another idea of a four-seater.
Okay, so the 989
was it in 1988?
Okay,
and 3 years later, this one, yes.
When I look at this, I see the Toledo, the Seat Toledo.
A little bit.
I don't know. Don't
but
ask
only
me why.
A little bit. It has not the typical design of a Porsche.
No.
But it's interesting too. It's interesting
it was
too.
A study. It was
not everyone heard about a 932.
No.
And you have, if you want to move this car, there is no engine or something, but you have a steering wheel. You can put it here, and then you can choose the direction.
I was thinking,
cool,
thinking, what is this? Because is it like clay? Is it a clay model?
I'm sure, yes. Yes, take a look here.
Yeah, it looks
like it's a clay model,
It's a clay model.
Yeah. So I would say we will go better later. You will choose a 918 and I will take the Carrera GT. I'm modest, you know. So
this was the best road car I ever drove.
Yeah, the 918 is, what can I tell you? So 887 horsepower, 2 electric motors, the V8 naturally aspirated engine. So that's really, and a plug-in hybrid. Not everybody knows. So here the fuel tank, and on the opposite,
it's a plug-in.
Yeah, it's possible to plug in.
It blew my mind. What the acceleration of this car was like something crazy.
I still remember we have one time a year in the summer a special party for all the workers, we call ourselves Porscheaner, for all Porscheaner, big party in the summer. And I still remember it was in 2011 like this, I'm not sure, because the series production started in 2013 till 15, but in 2011 like this, they presented a concept car at the party. And I saw the car with my wife and I said, that's a Porsche, what's going on? I said, that's incredible.
So it was a total surprise, you mean?
Yeah. It was a completely surprise for me. I didn't know. It was a top secret project in Weissach, you know. And here is another one. And what's important is, so as well as in the museum, we have here the colleagues, the mechanicians from the workshop to make the maintenance, to restore, to repair the cars. I told you yet, so we call it Porsche Heritage Experience. So we take part on historical races, events, expositions. So the colleagues, they bring the cars in the right condition.
Okay, and so they're the ones, those are the guys that take care of these special cars?
Of course, of all the cars. Of all the cars.
Yeah, but I mean, for example, if you want to take care of a racing car, you'd have to have someone from Porsche Motorsport to do it.
No, they have the know-how for the race cars too. Okay, if they need a special information or something, they can talk about with the colleagues in Weissach, that's no problem. Okay. But they have really a very big know-how. So we not only have the cars in the museum and from more than 70 years of Porsche cars, so also at the time before, when Ferdinand Porsche was employed by companies as Pelo or Lohner, Austro Daimler, so you have to know that's important too. So they need a lot of know-how, more than... We have an interesting car in the workshop, in the museum. Austro Daimler Sascha, did you hear the race car?
No.
One in the Targa Florio, and it was an Austro Daimler race car. So Ferdinand Porsche was a technical director at Austro Daimler, and this was a project from 1922. So this year, 100 years old.
Because I know that he took on lots of projects before founding Porsche as a design and an engineering company long before.
Long before.
A car constructor. But and he took part in loads of projects, pre-war projects, racing projects.
Yes. So he started to work in 1893 at an electric company, Bela Egger, in the capital of Austria, in Vienna, and till 1923. Then he came the first time to Stuttgart. He worked as a technical director at Daimler Stuttgart for 4 years. Then he still went back to Austria, but in 1931 he opened his own design or construction office in the city of Stuttgart, and the first ground of building in Zuffenhausen in 1938.
So is it more or less what you wanted to? I'm more than satisfied. Because I'm more than satisfied with what we've got. So if
it's enough for you, it's enough for me too.
Okay then.
So.
Thank you, guys.